Hey folks, welcome to the Wealth Transfer with TC. Today I want to share with you guys a biblical pattern type dealing with the wealth transfer in Israel's exodus from Egypt and entry into Canaan and eventually into the Promised Land. The world, and including the church, is in this bondage like in Egypt, and that we're going to be loosed from that and cross through the Red Sea. And I wanted to share what I feel like God has shared with me about the wealth transfer. And it's one of the reasons why I believe that the wealth transfer is not something that's going to happen within a year or 2 years, or maybe not even 3 years, maybe even longer. Totally and completely, the main part of the wealth transfer will be over with. And many people think that the wealth transfer is just in crypto, but the wealth transfer, what people need to understand, that there are various markets that are going to be participating in what we call the wealth transfer, right? You got the stock market, you got the bonds market, you got the crypto market, you got the foreign exchange market, you got commodities and precious metals markets, you got the real estate market, right? And the list goes on and on. The wealth transfer is not just Shiba Inu. It's not just, a handful of cryptos and a few other things. It's many other things, and most people do not understand it. And that's one of the reasons why I think that a lot of these people get things wrong when it comes to saying the wealth transfer is getting ready to happen or it's happening with Shiba Inu. They don't really have a full understanding of the wealth transfer. And when it comes to us being in Egypt right now, I have this map here in front of me, and this is where we are at in the wealth transfer. We're still stuck in the bondage of Egypt. We're still at a point where the Pharaoh has not let God's people go yet. And this adventure, these travels that we're doing within the wealth transfer, is not something that's going to happen within a short period of time. And there's a lot of things that are going to happen all the way up leading into the Promised Land. And that's for those of you who actually survive that long and make it into the Promised Land. Because many people are not. If we're going to look at the biblical pattern type, we're going to look at it from when they left Egypt all the way up into the Promised Land. Looking at Maria Conwell's One Small Flame page on her Crypto Word Dream back from August 15th, and she's again talking about the double tsunamis. And I was reading it, and then she has this picture here where you have these two waves, right? You have two waves that come in where it's happening with Shiba Inu, where it reaches $1, and then the next wave will be $13. After it hits $1, things are going to retract. After it hits $13, then it's going to retract again. That's part of the wealth transfer. It's not going to be just where it's just going to go up to these prices and that's it, and then we're done. No, because we now know that there are even more pricing points, prophetically speaking, above $13. Right? So we're going to have multiple waves, but the first two waves are very important. That post that she did, it was, or what I remember reading and also being portrayed in movies, about the parting of the Red Sea, right? Leaving the land of Egypt, right, out of the hands of Pharaoh with his double tsunami waves, right? And there's going to be a lot of joy. There's going to be a lot of celebration once we get through it, but we got to get to that point first. And I believe that once we cross through the Red Sea and out of the land of Egypt, we know that Pharaoh's army did get destroyed. And so when I look at the map and where we are at right now, right, we're still in financial bondage as a whole, the church, God's people. Once we get through that Red Sea moment, right, and the two tsunami waves, right, and there's going to be a lot of joy, there's going to be a lot of happiness, but also at the same time, if you are willing to go all the way within the wealth transfer and you were really to help establish the kingdom of God on this earth, you're going to have to make it into the Promised Land. And that's why it's important that, start learning all these different things concerning trading in all the markets, because this is a long-term scenario that we're going to be going through here. Once we cross the Red Sea, right, we go into the wilderness. A lot of people think when it comes to the wilderness that they were just walking around aimlessly, and that's not the case at all whatsoever. And God is going to have to sustain us during that time period, because there's going to be a lot of things going on in the world. And what we built up with our storehouses, what we took with us to cross the Red Sea, is what we're going to have when the world is falling apart. When you can't go to the store and buy food, you already have it in your storehouse. That is going to be part of the wilderness experience and having to be sustained from God. And a lot of people who aren't involved in the wealth transfer, who don't know anything, will be helping those people get through that time period. That will be the manna from heaven. The people that have their storehouses ready to not just for their own families, but for everybody else too as well. And there's a lot of things that are going to happen in the wealth transfer in order to get into the promised land. And so part of the wilderness experience was Moses and the camp were involved in many battles all the way up to the promised land. And then when Moses died and Joshua took over, right, they went into the promised land and they fought many battles. And this whole thing, the going into the promised land and fighting battles, I think it took a total of 5 years. The very first battle that took place was at Rephidim, right, where the Amalekites came down and they attacked Israel. Israel didn't do anything. It was an unprovoked attack. And so what happened during that time period, right? That's in Exodus, I believe, chapter 17. When Hur and Aaron had to hold up Moses, his arms. And if his arms were down, they were losing the battle. If his arms were up, they were winning the battle. Right? So this was a battle. This was their first battle after crossing the Red Sea. And we, as the people of God, are going to have to go through all these different battles. And Moses, in his arms being held up, right? The way that pattern is the prophets. And we're going to have to hold up the prophets during this time period. And I'm not talking about these inaccurate prophets where they're just throwing anything out there and they're making stuff up and none of their prophecies come to pass. I'm talking about the true prophets, right? The ones that are accurate, the ones that who have been giving us the instructions. And there's a couple handfuls of those people right now. Because guess what? I guarantee that many of these prophets that are claiming to be prophets, and they've been wrong multiple times about many, many things, I don't think they'll even make it this far. I don't think they'll even make it to the first battle. But if they do, they're not going to make it to the promised land. And so we're going to have to hold up those true prophets with prayer so that we can get guidance and direction so that they can help us in this battle. Because if we're taking the finances from the unrighteous and giving it to the righteous, right, it's not just one group of people like the Egyptians and Ramses. He was just one king. And we have many battles that we're going to have to face. And the ones that we hold up, that we know that God is using them, those are the ones that we're going to have to hold up during this time period. And then we're also, after that particular battle, right? Obviously, the Israelites won, but there were some people that didn't make it, right? There were some people that went into battle and lost their lives. Then we get to Mount Sinai, where the prophet went on the top of the mountain, and he was gone for 40 days and 40 nights. Right? This is where God was giving the 10 commandments. And there's going to be a time period where it seems like the prophets aren't talking, and we're not getting any direction within this wealth transfer. And what are people going to do? They're going to start building golden calves. So when Moses came back down and he found out that Aaron was one of the people, right, that was holding his arm up in previous battles, right, that he participated in building this golden calf and people worshiping this false god. And so what happened with that? A lot of people were actually executed, right? Read the whole story. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to be eliminated from the wealth transfer during that time period, right? And actually, there's many, many battles that they had to face before they went into the promised land. And another one was, and this is going to be a pattern and a type, because we look at the powers that are in control now. You thought Pharaoh was bad, right? You have one of the battles that took place, King Og, and he was a Rephaim, which was a direct descendant of the Nephilim. So your level of who you're fighting is going to be even greater when you get to that point. King Og was the leader of the Amorites, and King Og was actually the last of the Rephaim. Right? He was a giant, right? But he wasn't as big as the ones that they were going to have to face. And so King Og was slain in that battle. But this just goes to show how people think that once we get through the Red Sea, that everything's going to be fine and God's kingdom is going to be established. It's not going to be established until we actually go into the promised land. Now, Moses himself wasn't allowed to go into the promised land, but Joshua was, right? And so what happened when they sent out the 12 spies? There were giants all throughout the land. And when you read the biblical story of all those battles and stuff and the types of tribes there were, most of these were giant tribes. And a lot of people don't realize that. These giants were massive and they were huge, right? And that's when we go in to the promised land and we win those battles against the giants. Then after we defeat all the giant tribes in the promised land, then that's when the kingdom of God is going to be established. And before they even went into the promised land, as they were winning their battles and taking over these different areas, they were establishing God's kingdom as they were going along. Because now they owned that land. And it brought fear to a lot of the giant tribes in Israel. And that's one of the reasons why that a lot of people who study the Bible and study like the giants of South and North America and how they actually fled the land and went somewhere else because they were afraid of what was going to happen if Joshua and his army showed up. And so this is the whole thing, that we are just at the beginning of the wealth transfer. And this is why I say it's going to take years. There are many different markets that are going to have to be transferred over. Most of you only understand stock and crypto. Some of you, your understanding goes beyond that with commodities and precious metals. Some of you, real estate. Most of you probably don't understand about bonds, right? But God has people working in all those different areas. And there are prophecies concerning all those different areas. Some of those we don't even understand and that we've actually discussed on this channel. So folks, even after we get out of Egypt, we have many battles to face. So this is going to be a tough uphill battle. Yes, once you cross the Red Sea and you sold off all your Shiba Inu and all your other stuff at $13 and now you're going to be pretty wealthy. But as soon as you get out of the Red Sea, a lot of things that are going on in the world may not be all that great. And you're going to face many, many battles going into the promised land. And you are going to be attacked unprovoked. So don't think just because you're sitting on millions of dollars or even hundreds of millions of dollars at this time period where everything is going to be okay. Because it's not. Because the enemy is going to be very upset and he's going to be coming after God's people. So folks, that's really all that I have for this. I just wanted to share this pattern that I think that God has shared with me concerning this. And, you can believe whatever you want to believe. And, but time will tell when all these things take place and how they take place to show you what it really means to establish God's kingdom. Because that is what this is all about. People will say that we are living in the last days. Well, act like you're living in that last days, right? And the wealth transfer is a part of the last days to establish his kingdom. It's going to be the true test for many people right now. And if this is what they really want, and if they really want to continue on within the wealth transfer, right? Because once you cross the Red Sea and you get out of the bondage of Egypt, things are going to get even more difficult. And just because you have money doesn't mean that it's going to be that much easier. So people have to think about right now, is this for you? And are you ready to cross the Red Sea? And are you ready for what's ahead for years down the road?